if I tried, for all the coughing and the hacking. And I didn't give Lance a ton of notice Saturday mid-morning or so I really appreciate his willingness to step in and do the morning service. It is a big blessing. We're going to be back in Job chapter 13, starting in verse 13. We're going to read down through, well, no we're not. We'll just read down through verse 18. Job is going to have a small declaration of faith here in chapters 13 through 16, and then he's going to start pleading his case. I want to talk to God. And he includes the friends at the very beginning with kind of a rebuke in there. And then he starts talking to God to finish out the chapter here. Excuse me for the cough drop, but I don't want to start coughing and not be able to get stopped. Job chapter 13, starting in verse 13. Hold your peace, let me alone, that I may speak, and let come on me what will. Wherefore do I take my flesh in my teeth, and put my life in mine hand? Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. But I will maintain mine own ways before him. He also shall be my salvation, for an hypocrite shall not come before him. Hear diligently my speech, and my declaration with your ears. Behold now, I have ordered my cause. I know that I shall be justified. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, tonight as we continue in the book, it is a very important lesson that is continually woven throughout Job's responses and all of his things to his friends. That the only answer that he has gotten to date is your character. And he fully trusts in it. And it is amazing that here is a man who is righteous, under attack from all different ways, including these friends. And yet the doctrine that comes out of his rebuttals and the high and lofty view that he has of you are admirable. Even in the midst of the darkest hours, the only thing keeping him going seems to be that he is squarely fixed on his Lord and very much wants to hear from you. We want to hear from you tonight. Help us to be encouraged. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All three of the friends have taken their shot. Job has started his rebuke in chapter 12. And then here in chapter 13, he starts off the first 12 verses here with a disappointment in his friends. And what he does and how he goes through this thing is a very firm, but also a very loving rebuke. He's not name-calling, he is just laying it out there. You guys are acting this way, and this is not okay. Now in verse 13, even though he includes his friends a little bit in the introduction to this section, he is turning his attention away from his friends, and he's turning his attention to a conversation with God. But what is so interesting about our section we're going to look at tonight is in this introduction, as we get to the end of it, you'll see that he is inviting his friends to sit still and listen while he talks to God and hopes that God will talk back to him. Starts off this declaration of faith with kind of a statement: I will take my case to God. Hold your peace, let me alone, that I may speak, and let come on me what will. In other words, y'all be quiet. Job is wanting to build up to a very important argument with his friends that involves God. And if he can, he would like, I would love to be in a courtroom with God, but now it's almost like He would be a witness against y'all because you keep telling me that I have sinned, and that's the reason for all of this stuff. I wish he would speak up and set the record straight. But as he starts this, he says, do not interrupt me. I don't want and I don't need to hear from you. So it's a very clear statement that they are not, while they are going to be, and he's going to reiterate this in a couple of verses, while you are welcome to listen, boys, shut your mouths, don't say a word, this isn't about you. I will talk to God, not you. I need to hear from God, not you. Sometimes well-meaning people just add to the difficulty of a trial. And all three of these fellas, he has patiently waited them out. He didn't interrupt them while they went on their tirades. And some of them said some really, really hurtful things to him. But now that all three of them have finished the first round, he's telling them, I would rather take this to God because obviously y'all aren't help. Let me alone to speak. In other words, I need to freely be able to utter my mind. And if I say, Lord, I'm innocent, and y'all jump in and interrupt me, it's going to create a problem here in the conversation that I would like to have with God. What's interesting is he acknowledges something that these fellas don't. Let come on me what will. When we stand before God, we stand alone. And that's what Job is trying to teach his friends right here. I know you all have an opinion about why all this stuff is happening to me, but it doesn't really matter what you think about the situation. What really matters is what does God think about the situation. Because when judgment day comes and I stand before him, if he doesn't answer me now and I don't get any vindication here on earth, when I stand before him, I'm going to stand alone. No one else can defend me. No one else can support me. No one else gets to accuse me, and they certainly can't excuse me. So you can't help me in any way, and you can't hurt me in any way. So let's treat this thing like a pre-judgment day, is what he is setting this up to be. On judgment day, I'm going to be standing before God. Y'all sit there and be quiet. God and I are going to have a conversation. And you can't help me on judgment day, and I really don't need you to help me now. I don't need you to accuse me, excuse me. Don't need your 5 cents, your 10 cents. God already knows. So I wish that we could talk. It doesn't involve you, so please stay out of it. The interesting thing here is he makes a statement that God will defend what he is doing. So he doesn't need color commentary from his friends. Now that's the whole premise that he is building up to here. And to let him know how serious he is about this whole situation, he starts off and he says, whatever happens is going to happen. That's the second part of the verse. Let come on me what will. I will risk addressing this powerful, dangerous, sovereign God. That's what he was talking about in chapter 12, right? Part of the problem with your thinking is that you limit a sovereign God. You want to put him in a box, and you think that he only works this way and he only punishes this way. And actually the undertone, the unsaid undertone is, and you really only pull him out of that box when you need him to act that way. And people today still treat God that way. We call it the genie in a bottle. I'm going to live my life the way I want to live my life, and then when I get in trouble or I need something, I'm going to rub the lamp and God's going to pop out, and he's going to act one of two ways on my behalf. He's going to bless me, or he's going to judge whoever's causing problems. And when the situation's done with, God, if you could just like boop, 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 back in your little, and I'll put you up there on the shelf and I'll live my life. Job has spent a lot of chapter 12 talking about his dangerous God. He is in control of life and breath. He is in control of creation. He is in control of all these different things, and he certainly doesn't ask anybody's opinion on it. So now here in verse 13 he says, y'all be quiet and let me speak with God, because I am going to dare to go there. And Let come on me what may. He is not taking this lightly. This is not a flippant attitude about God. This is not about, I'm going to ask the man upstairs if he'll help me in some way or another. The phrase that's used here, while it's another one of those axioms, we would say, well, whatever happens, happens. When do you say that? You say it when all the other options are exhausted, right? You're looking at a situation and you think, okay, there are some options here, and then, no, there's not, no, there's not, no, there's not, no, there's not. Well, it seems like there's only one thing left to do. I don't know, that doesn't seem safe. Well, whatever happens, happens. Because it seems like the only option left to you. The other way that we use this sometimes is when the best option seems really dangerous. Well, I could do this, but that's not really the outcome that I'm looking for. The outcome that I really want is to be vindicated about my moral character, and the only one that can do that is God. So I am going to come before God and pour out, and everybody's like, you would dare to challenge God? Well, he's not challenging God. That's not the attitude that he has here. He simply says, whatever happens, happens. He goes a step farther in verse 14, and he says, I take my flesh in my teeth. We don't use that phrase. And it can be misunderstood. There are some commentaries that argue, why should I anxiously desire to save my life? Now that is not what he's saying. Or the judgment is so bad that I desire to tear at my flesh. That is found in some places in the Old Testament, Isaiah chapter 9 verse 20 and Isaiah 49:26. But that's not what he's saying either. In the context here, remember this is poetry, and so you have lines and stanzas that are being grouped together. In this stanza, he is accepting responsibility. I accept what God will do to me for what I say. In other words, I take my flesh, I take my life in my teeth. If I'm going to approach God and I am going to talk with him, then I have to realize that he can snuff me out like a candle. I take my life in my teeth. I accept the responsibility of my words and of my actions. Second phrase is very much like it. Put my life in my hand. You hear people say that from time to time. Well, I took my life into my own hands. And that's biblical. In 1 Samuel chapter, well, let's turn there. Let's take just a minute, understand the context. 1 Samuel chapter 18. Is that right? Thought it was 21. 1 Samuel 18:21. Maybe it was 2 Samuel and I wrote it down wrong. I do that from time to time. Nope. Well, I'll have to try and find it later. There's a lady who is in a difficult situation, and she was told by God's prophet, this is what you're going to do. She said, okay, this is what I did. Now, Saul's going to be upset about this. I have taken my life into my own hands. In other words, what she's saying is, you told me that if I did this, things were going to work out for me. God was going to take care of me. Saul knows about this. 28, 21? Thank you. verse 21. The woman came unto Saul, and saw that he was sore troubled, and said unto him, Behold, thine handmaid hath obeyed thy voice, and I have put my life in my hand, and have hearkened unto thy words which thou spakest unto me. Now therefore I pray thee, hearken thou also unto the voice of thy handmaid, and let me set a morsel of bread before thee, and eat, that thou mayest have strength when thou goest on thy way. She's putting herself out there in a dangerous situation. I realize that I could die because of the actions that I have done. And that's a biblical thought. You're going to do this, there could be consequences. You're going to rise up against the king. The king has the right to kill you. Esther said basically the same thing, right? Do you not know that if I go in there and he doesn't lower the scepter to me, I forfeit my life? I'm taking my life in my hands here. That's the thought that's happening here. So Job is not approaching this in a lighthearted way at all. And he's not approaching this in a way that is demeaning of God. Actually, the opposite is true on both counts. Because of his high and lofty view of God, he realizes no sinful man has the right to come before God. We're going to see that in another statement here in a minute. And no man can see God at any time and live. So if he asks for God to show up and have a conversation with him, what if God does show up? Haven't you asked to forfeit your life, is what Job is saying? In other words, he wants his friends to understand that he so badly would like to have a conversation with God because he feels like God would vindicate him, and then the three of them would understand that they are so far off the track here of what's happening. Verses 15 and 16 of Job 13. I trust him. Now, verse 15 looks really easy when you're reading it in the English, but I got to tell you, this is kind of a difficult verse. And if you pick up 20 commentaries, you're probably going to find a dozen different views. I'll just throw some out there. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. Now, in the English, you're like, I'm going to trust in God. I don't care what he does to me. If it kills me, I'm still going to trust in God. Poole says, even if God increases my torments to the point of death, I am without any hope of recovery in this world, should I despair or should I not trust him? In other words, he's saying that Job is asking this kind of as a question. Clark says, I have no dependence but on God. Should he slay me, I will trust that when I am tried, I will come forth as gold. JFB, that's three guys actually, say, though he slay me, I dare no more hope. I don't like that view, because if he slays you, what about eternity? And then, can't even pronounce these guys, Keel and Delitzsch. Very difficult commentaries to read and to wade through, but they're really good ones. He says, I will wait to see what he may do. And that sounds a whole lot different than what you read in the first part of 15 in English. But here's the problem, okay? Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. That Hebrew word trust is yakal. It means to wait, to be patient, to hope. It doesn't mean to trust. In fact, you go through the entire Old Testament, and the primary use in the Old Testament means to wait or to tarry. This word is used over and over and over again. And Saul waited, yakal, for Samuel, and he doesn't come, right? Go down here and wait for me till I get there. Tarry until the sun goes down. Those are all uses of that word, yakal. The secondary Old Testament use is the word hope. In fact, the only time in the entire Old Testament that it is translated trust is right here in Job chapter 13, verse 15, which is interesting because Job uses this word like 5 or 6 times throughout the book. And it's never, ever translated trust. It's always wait or hope. And actually, if you look at the meaning of wait and hope, it's the same thing. Hope is waiting on something that you expect to happen, biblically. Now, we don't use that word in the English. We say, hope it doesn't rain tomorrow. We don't know if it's going to rain tomorrow or not. We're just planning something and we hope it doesn't rain. But biblically, wait and hope are very similar, because I hope that I'm going to be in heaven someday. We don't say that because in the English it sounds bad. We say, I know that I'm going to be in heaven someday. But biblically you could say, I hope for heaven someday, because that's what it means. You are waiting on something to happen that has been promised to happen. Okay? So if you take that translation and the carryover of the context of verse 14, I understand that a powerful sovereign God can kill me, because chapter 12, he controls life and death, right? And creation and everything else. But I believe I am innocent, and I am willing to wait and hope on whatever he chooses to do. That's what he's saying here. I know it doesn't sound the same, and it doesn't, look as good if you cross-stitched it and hung it on the wall. But it is an incredible thought, because Job is willing to put himself out here, and basically what he's saying is, I'm just waiting on God's character to show up and vindicate me. I'm hoping in God's character to show up and vindicate me. Look at the second half of verse 15. But I will maintain mine own ways before him. In other words, I am so convinced of my innocence by a clear conscience, and you could add in here, no matter what you three say, that I am willing before my Maker, who can kill me, chapter 12, to boldly but submissively assert my integrity. Now, he's not saying that God is wrong in judging him and putting him through this trial. Not what he's saying. What he is saying is, I understand the character of God, and I understand my innocence, so I also understand that I am perfectly all right in standing up for myself and saying, before God as my Maker, I am innocent of what you all three are claiming of me. And so I just simply am asking him to vindicate me. He follows it up in verse 16. He also shall be my salvation, for an hypocrite shall not come before him. I love this verse. This is a bold, strong, warm verse. What he says is, I am fully confident of my salvation. Are you fully confident of your salvation? You ought to be. Now John's been going through it, laying out all the evidence. He calls everybody to his decision, and then he takes the last chapter and says, hey boys, life is drastically going to change because of your salvation. I am so confident of my salvation in him. Now, this can play out two ways. I will be shown to be a man of moral integrity in this life, or I will enjoy the eternal salvation after I die. Jump to chapter 19 and look at verse 25. In chapter 19, verse 25 is going to put it differently. Similar thought. For I know that my Redeemer, what? And that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself, and mine eyes shall behold and not another, though my reins be consumed within me. Listen, I feel like I'm rotting away, and this flesh might rot away, but I will live again, and I will see my God. I can't say that part right there without thinking of Nicole Mullen's song, My Redeemer Lives. It's based on this very verse. So I want to read it to you. No, I'm not going to sing it. You can thank me later. My Redeemer lives, who taught the sun where to stand in the morning. Job could have wrote this. Who told the ocean you can only come this far? Who showed the moon where to hide till evening? Whose words alone can catch a falling star? I know my Redeemer lives. I know my Redeemer lives. All of creation testify. This life within me cries, I know my Redeemer lives. The very same God that spins things in orbit runs to the weary, the worn, and the weak. And the same gentle hands that hold me when I'm broken, they conquer death to bring me victory. Chorus again. He lives to take away my sins. He lives forever, I proclaim, that the payment o'er my sins was the precious life he gave. But now he's alive, and there's an empty grave. I know my Redeemer lives. What's Job saying? Same thing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, right? Who's going to deliver you? And they stood there before the king, and they said, I know he's going to work. I know he's going to deliver me. I just don't know which way it's going down. Are they delivering me in this life, or is he delivering me into the next? And Job here, in answering his friends, says, I am so convinced of my moral integrity, I just want you to know, boys, I know my Redeemer lives. He'll either vindicate me in this life, or he'll vindicate me with eternal life. We'll go back to chapter 13 because he's not done building his argument here. He is so solid on the character of God. He also shall be my salvation, for an hypocrite shall not come before him. They have told him over and over and over again, come on, Job. Just admit whatever secret sin it is. Just come clean and God will slam the brakes on this judgment. He'll start pouring out blessing and blessing and blessing on you. And Job's response is, hypocrites shall not come before him. Well, you want to turn all the way to the end of the book in Revelation chapter 21 and verse 27. It's talking about the pearly gates and that are always open and everything going on in heaven. And it says, there is no corrupt thing that comes before the presence of God. And it names a few. No defiler, no deceiver, no liar, no. It names a few categories. But the whole premise of the verse is, there is not one evil thing. God doesn't have to shut the gates of heaven to try and keep evil out. Evil cannot, will not, ever come before the presence of God. When he judges the world and creates a new heaven and a new earth, he doesn't talk about sin again after this. It's been dealt with. He recognizes that God is holy and just and pure and righteous and true. But he also recognizes that he does not change, right? Malachi 3:6, I am the Lord, I change not. He's faithful, he's eternal, he is unchanging. Fellows, I am willing to stand before my Maker, and he will be my salvation, one way or the other, on this world or in the next, because of his character. No evil is going to come before him, and he is not going to change his mind, and I know that I'm going to be there, so that ought to tell you something about me. Basic premise of the argument. Verses 17 all the way down through 28, he's going to start expressing his desire to talk with God, and we're only going to get through 17 and 18 tonight. But this is how he introduces this topic to his buddies here. Boys, you all are invited to listen. I'm going to say invited, but that's not what we see here. Verse 17, they're actually ordered to listen. Hear diligently my speech and my declaration with your ears. This is a command. There is an understood you at the beginning of this. You hear diligently my speech and declaration with your ears. The word that's used here for listen is to listen hear is to listen intelligently. In other words, he is saying, I want you to listen to my discourse with God. You got no part in it. Remember, you're sitting there quiet and you're welcome to listen. But there's no interruptions, there's no helping, there's no just be quiet, sit there and observe. And I want you to do that. It's very similar to the rebuke that we saw up in verse 6 of the same chapter. There's no verb in the second line of this poetry. And so you could translate it, and my speaking in your ears. So understood you, listen intelligently, give ear and consider everything that I'm saying when I talk, and my speaking in your ears. So as I'm speaking with God and I am discoursing with him and it's rattling off your ears, I don't want you to just sit there and go, yeah, there's old Job going on and on and on and on and on again. I want you to listen very carefully, use attention and discernment to what I'm saying. And then, this was probably shocking to him, there's no invitation or intent for them to speak, right? He starts off in verse 13 and says, be quiet and listen to what I have to say. And we get down here to verse 17 and he says, now y'all listen very carefully, and that's the only job that you have. Verse 18, I am prepared to speak. He shares two declarative statements, the first half of verse 18 and the second half. Behold, now I have ordered my cause. I am ready to start now. In other words, he's saying, I want to have a conversation with God, and I don't need, to have a recess from the courtroom so that we can have 15 days to prepare. I'm prepared. Like, bop the gavel and let's go. That's what he's saying here. I am ready to start right now. I am already prepared. The word ordered means to set in a row. We would say he has his ducks in a row. It means to arrange and to put in order. In other words, not just saying, got this duck and this duck and this duck and this duck and this duck. Y'all just, get in a line. Okay, that looks good. Let's go. That's not what the word means. Even though it says that the ducks are in a row, it would be if you arranged the ducks from oldest to youngest in a row. Every single one of them intentionally placed where they are. So in other words, what he is saying here is, I am fully prepared to have a conversation with God. I have considered what can be said against me. I have considered everything that can be said for me. I know my evidence. I know my talking points. I know the questions that I want to ask God, and I am ready right now to plead my case. The only thing preventing me from doing it is I haven't heard from him yet. Second declaration statement. I know that I shall be justified. He is fully confident that before God, listen, there's things that you can do to convince somebody you're telling the truth. I swear before God and everybody. Cross my heart and hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. I mean, on and on. And you can call everybody to the witness stand. But he has talked for a chapter about how high and holy he sees God and how sovereign and powerful he is. And then as he goes into this section, he says, it is not a light thing to stand before a holy God and give account. I'm willing to do it. And then I'll wait and see what his response is to me. Is he taking me out of here? Is he vindicating me? But I am already with my arguments, and I am fully confident that before God, I will be declared clean or righteous. He's not worried about going into court and losing the case. He's just wondering, is God going to answer him now? Or is this a conversation they have in heaven at Judgment Day? Either way, the burning desire of Job's heart is he wants to talk to God. And he's going to start in verse 19 and continue on down through. That conversation that the friends are allowed to listen to and hopefully understand and grow from. But he's asked them not to interrupt in any way, shape, or form. Praises or prayer requests?